book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes. We've been considering in our afternoon sessions, that is when I've preaching slot, Ecclesiastes, and trying to answer the question, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of life? The preacher has so many questions, and some of the questions he tries to answer. And in the attempt to answer the question, what is the meaning of life, we did notice that at one point the preacher tried to check by observing, as we have mentioned before, in the observation of what goes on in life. Just observing. And he would say, this is what I've seen. And then after he's making observation, it's like the preacher now saying, let's test what is now experience, what we experience in life, in search of the meaning of life. Now, the preacher uses a phrase or a word which is vanity or wind, in the Hebrew word havel, H-A-V-E-L. Havel is like a term used of smoke. So, for example, to make a simple illustration, there's smoke here, something is burning, there's smoke. Even if it's just deep, deep smoke, you can't even see the other side. If we say, please try to catch the smoke, and then say, show me. You open your hand, basically there will be nothing. But you caught something. True. Something you caught something. But there's nothing. And so the preacher is saying, that's how life is. You think you are enjoying life. Like a great friend of mine called Lawrence Neville said, I like Kapula life. Kapula life, son. You think you like Kapula, you are enjoying life. But at the end of the day, when you open your hand or your palm, there is nothing. So the preacher uses part of his experience and also his observation. And this afternoon, I want us to see how the preacher slowly makes very deep conclusions. Which conclusion I know some of us present here, or some of you listening, including myself, at one point you reach such a stage with life when you hated life. You just feel bad about life. Why am I not making it? You think of your friends, you're together, graduated together, maybe finished high school together, you look at them, how they are prospering, and some, they are married, they have children, and you're still struggling with your whatever course that you failed to pass. I remember a brother was part of this church a long time ago. It took him 17 years to finish what you call SCCA. Even the kids who were 10 years, they finished high school, they graduate, they finish and so forth. He's still struggling, I don't know whichever course, which was so difficult. Maybe Mr. Markford Jr. would know those courses that are very difficult. It's like another brother who was doing Ziale. In those days, they would suspend you for 5 years. He failed. And even the kids behind him, one of his nephews graduated. They're thinking, what's the meaning of life? I've been trying. And lo and behold, when you pass, you find there's nothing in the heart. And then you start to hate life. I know I'm speaking to someone. You've been passing through issues and you feel like it's not worth it. I had a good life. Things turned sour. Again, things were going on well again. But Lord, what's the meaning of life? So the preacher comes to that point, chapter 2 and and verse 17. After narrating his experience and experiencing wisdom and foolishness, he compared foolishness and wisdom. And at the end of it all, he even said, even this is just useless. Let's read together from verse 12, although my focus basically will be on verse 17. Listen to how the preacher, with regard to his personal life experience. We mentioned last time how he went into projects, enjoying life. Why? Laughter. And he says, oh, this is just like Kabwe, just trying to catch the smoke. At the end, there is nothing. In verse 12, he says, then I turned myself to consider wisdom and madness and folly. It's like somebody saying, let's enjoy everything which is there to enjoy. In the picture of verse 10, you read verse 10 where he says, whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor. And then in verse 12 it says, then I turned myself to consider wisdom, madness, and folly, which is foolishness. For what can make the man do who succeeds the king? Only what he has already done. Then I saw that wisdom excels folly. Wisdom is better than folly and foolishness, as light excels darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. Yet I myself perceive that the same event happens to them all. The wise and the fool, they all die. The wise and the fool, they all have challenges in life. The wise and the fool, they all pass through sickness. The wise and the fool, at the end of the day, have something that equalizes them. And so in verse 15 it says, so I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, it also happens to me who is wise. And why was I then more wise? What's the benefit of wisdom? Then I said in my heart, this also is Kabwe. It is vanity. It's like catching the smoke. Now, what he's doing is not just now observing, it's from his personal experience. The preacher, the wise man. For, this is how he concludes, for there is no more remembrance of the wise than the fool forever. Those of us who have experienced death of someone who is so close, the way God has simply wired our minds and our lives, immediately you start leaving the graveyard, you put the wreaths there, and if you are of my tribe, you go back home, I'll be Sambolyamfwa, where everybody now has to say something, put maybe there the remaining spouse, and ask some questions. What happened? Tell us. And after you've done all those things, you do all kinds of rituals which we need to address, but these things are happening among Christians and non-Christians. And you ask the question, why are we doing all these? I remember very vividly some time ago when Emulamo passed on, and then because this Mulamo had kids elsewhere who were old, they were even older than my cousin. So the sons now were descending on my cousin. What about this? Where are the papers for the house? There was that property and so forth. All kinds of questions. And I stood and says, why are we asking all these things? Where were you? Anyway, at the end of the day, it's part of closure. That's what one of the sons said. It's part of closure. Bring all the clothes here. Share. Anyone can pick anything here. Don't worry, there's nothing devilish about it. And then you ask, why are we doing all these things? It's part of closure. We want to forget about the date. And this is what he said. For there is no more remembrance of the wise, just as there will be no more remembrance of the foolish. They may remember your foolishness, but at the end of the day, it may just be part of joke. They remember your wise words of wisdom, but soon and very soon, you will be forgotten. People will come after a year for a memorial, and the wise man is saying, than the fool forever. Both will go to the same end. Since all that now is will be forgotten in the days to come. And how does a wise man die? How does a wise man die? He's asking. As the fool. So the death is saying, death is the equalizer. It's like all the good things that you've done, all the wisdom, the books you've written. Yes, you may be remembered, but death seemed to be the equalizer. And that's the concern with the preacher. He says, death seemed to be the equalizer of all things. And listen, the conclusion of the matter. Here is the conclusion of the matter in verse 17, and that's my text. It says, therefore, I hated life. It's like he's saying, life has no meaning, Wamnina. We all end up the same place, at the grave. Because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is havel, vanity, catching that smoke and grasping for the wind. Then I hated all my labor in which I had toiled under the sun. Because, now you start to see how he's reasoning. He's reasoning beyond his life. And all the things you and I labor in, put our effort, and have sleepless nights. He says, because I must leave it to the man who come after me. So this is a time of conclusion and a time of reflection, like I'll be making application. There should be in your life a time when you pause, come out of your busy schedule, and ask yourself and reflect, is what I'm doing the real meaning of life? Or I'm just chasing the wind? A time to come out and just reflect. So he says, wait a minute. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will rule over all my labor in which I have toiled, in which I have shown myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Some of us present here. So maybe you have inherited things you never labored for. Your dad, your mom, your uncle, or somebody labored for. You are enjoying it. Some actually end up behaving very foolish. I keep giving this example because it's too close to us. Chinika Road, Kabelenga Road, there's that house. It's now doesn't even look nice, that house, which a man called Real Master, a known guy in Dollar, he bought that house from Mr. Muluwa's children. He pulled it down and put up that house. Who will inherit? You don't know. Maybe that person will be listening. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Yet he will rule over all your labor. So this in a way made the preacher to hate life. What then is the meaning of life? And then he goes on to say, therefore I turned my heart and despaired. all the labor in which I have toiled under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, yet he must leave his heritage to a man who has not labored for it. This also, he says, is vanity, and he says a great evil. It's not fair from the way the preacher puts it. For what has a man for all his labor and for striving of his heart, which he has toiled under the sun? For all his days are sorrowful. His work burdensome. I'm sure I'm speaking to some men here who are fathers, who are husbands. Even in the night, his heart takes no rest. This is also vanity. Let me just conclude reading, then I'll come to my text. Nothing is better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw from the hand of God. That God gives you an opportunity in life to enjoy. For who can eat, or who can have enjoyment more than I, as is boasting? For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his heart. But to the sinner, he gives the work of gathering and collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This also is vanity and chasing after the wind. Now, what is it that I would want to talk about? It's the aspect of an issue to do with conclusion of life and reflection upon your life. Let me just show you how the preacher draws his conclusion and how he makes the conclusion. And then also within the process of making a conclusion, there is a reflection on the meaning of life. First, it's a reflection upon wisdom, madness, and folly. He's basically reflecting on the things that make people have sleepless nights. He uses the word there, labor. Things I toil for. Things which give me sleepless nights. Things that worry me. Things that wear me out. Things that make me even lose my weight and appetite. He says, pause and reflect. And this is the way he does his reflection. He realizes that all these things are folly. And in fact, he says, he saw that wisdom was better than foolishness. Just as light is better than darkness. And then he says, at least the wise man can see where he's going. The foolish can't. Unfortunately, in his reflection, he sees the end, the conclusion of the matter. The end. They all, or both, end up in the same state. And that's the conclusion of the matter. It has to do with how you end up your life in death. If your life will revolve around amassing wealth, just enjoying, the end, according to the preacher, will be meaningless. There will be no profit out of it. It's that end he calls of the wicked. He calls the end of the one who has no fear of God. It's like all that which you'll be doing, if there's no fear of God, it will end up actually very, very disappointing. And in fact, not even disappointing, it will end up disastrous. Because at the end, you don't know who even inherit the things that you've been toiling for. Then he quickly move on to say, this is what made me to hate life. This is what makes me to hate life. I know what I'm talking about. I've had experiences in my life when you are in the valley And when you look at your neighbor, you look some of your friends, even your relatives, and you feel like you're a member like myself. Oh, I never lived in Borokoso, but there's this term, we are cursed. We can't go anywhere. You just make a bit of some progress, you crash. And before long, you start thinking, it's not worth it. And people go into depression. I mean, real depression, where they hate life. They end up being numb. They can't think properly. And that's what the preacher is saying. I hate life. A life which is a gift of God can actually be spoiled and ruined that you hate it, and you don't want even to continue living. So he hated life. My dear brothers and sisters, listen. If your life is all about what this man is telling us, amassing wealth, making yourself comfortable, laboring and toiling, without knowing the end or considering the end, the consequent result of that would be you will hate life. Because what will happen is what he is explaining here. That you don't really know who will finally take up your property. You have no clue. Even if it's your own son, your own daughter, your own children. If all that you are doing in life is to make your life good and nice and sweet, one project after another project and another project, just know you have been deceived. You don't know the meaning of life. The preacher tells us, look at the end of your life. This is what it will be, because you are going to leave everything behind. No one, except one fool I saw a long time ago in 1999, who bought himself a big portion of the grave space in the USA because he loved his car. And he says, you must bury me in my car. And a special suit. It was there in the Times magazine, somewhere in 1999, because I found it at Dr. Petty's place when they were still staying in the same house. He was being lowered in this nice Porsche car. That was his coffin, according to this chair. And they lowered it. From dust you came, to dust you shall return, you fool. If that's what you are living for, my brother, think of the end and reflect. Let me just show you an example. Why the preacher was saying what he was saying. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 12. 1 Kings chapter 12. And if we want to say the preacher here is King Solomon, let's just see what happened when Solomon died and his son took over. What happened? With all his wisdom, even him as he speaks, this is exactly what happened. I'll just read through that so that we just have a feel of what's going on here. It says, think of the end. 1 Kings and chapter 12. Let me just read that. I'll just read, then we can get the meaning from there. We commence our reading from 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 41. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? We which we want to believe is a preacher's book. And the period of that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel was 40 years. Then Solomon rested with his fathers. Basically, very humble way to say Solomon died and he was buried in the city of David, his father, and Rehoboam, his son, reigned in his place. Now listen, inheriting things from a father like Solomon, who was so rich, full of wisdom, the son takes over. And Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it, he was still in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon and had been dwelling in Egypt, that they sent and called him. Then Jeroboam and the whole assembly of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, they are speaking to the son who is now to become king and inherit all the bounties and the riches of his father. Your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke which he put on us, and we will save you. So he said to them, depart for 3 days, then come back to me. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who stood before his father Solomon while he still lived. And he said, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you will be a servant to these people today, and save them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, they will be your servants. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who had grown up with him, who stood before him, the Gen Z. Forget about Tabakaya. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer these people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men, the Gen Z, the millennial men who had grown up with him, spoke to him, saying, thus you shall speak to these people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made our yoke heavy, but you make it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than any of my father's waist. Okay? You are inheriting now. Then, and now, whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I'll add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I'll chastise you with scourges. Scourges where you put even those nails at the end. And he said, you're dressing now. Okay? So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam, and they said, as the king had directed, said, come back to me after 3 days. Then the king answered the people roughly and rejected the advice which the elders had given him. And he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I'll add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of the event was from the Lord, that he might fulfill his word, which the Lord had spoken by Ahaz the Shilonite of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. Now, when all Israel saw that the king did not listen to them, the people answered the king, saying, what share have we in David? We have no inheritance in the son of Jesse. To your tents, O Israel. Oh, now see to your own house, O David. So Israel departed to their tents, and Rehoboam reigned over the children of Israel who dwelt in the cities of Judah. I want to conclude at verse 19. Then King Rehoboam sent Adoram, who was the charge of revenue, but all Israel stoned him with stones. And he died. Therefore, King Rehoboam mounted his chariot in haste to flee to Jerusalem. So Israel has been in rebellion against the house of David to this day. So, the very words of the preacher came to be true. Who knows the things that you are laboring for? Whether the one who is going to inherit will be wise or a fool. And often, they are fools because they never labored for them. Often, they have no regard of all the investments you put up. And often, they become reckless. So this is what made the preacher to hate life. And so he's asking, what is the meaning of life if this is what life is all about? And it's like life is just a cycle. The same things that happened to that generation happened to the second generation is still happening today. And today you and I are still deceived, thinking we are better off than what the preacher is saying. Let me invest for my children. Let me labor extra and so forth. Let me do and so forth. Lo and behold, like Jesus in that parable, today your soul is required. Who then shall eat all that you've done? And so the preacher, because of this fact of life, he pauses. That's my application, my dear brothers and sisters. We need to pause and reflect on what we are doing in life. We need to pause and reflect and see what is the true meaning of life. Because what the preacher is telling us is the truth. Just an example I gave you of his own son, who was a fool. The father was wise. The father was wise. Raised up by this wise man full of wisdom. The son was a fool. And how many fools do we have as sons and daughters today? And I can tell you where the foolishness and the folly is coming from. It's coming from us, fathers. And I'm speaking to fathers. The things that we have put forth as these are the main issues of life and living. They are watching. They are seeing where we spend most of our time, most of our money, where we worry most, that things that make us to become angry when we have failed to achieve. Those things will not depart from them. If there was an element of foolishness in you, in your wisdom, your son will become even worse. The foolishness will just be now overt. Everyone will be able to see. Friends, what is the meaning of life? We need to pause and ask ourselves, is what I'm pursuing in life, is it that which will give me meaning and profit and true joy? Listen how he concludes, and he says, wait a minute, nothing's better for the man than that he should just eat and drink, and that his soul should enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw was from the hand of God. In other words, he's simply saying, wait a minute, there is a God. And this is why his conclusion is the same conclusion to every aspect of his confusion and perplexity. The conclusion he makes is, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God. Keep his commandment. For this is man's will. This is man's all, not will. Man's all. This is what humanity should be pursuing. To fear God, to love God, to know God, and to obey God. For God will bring every good work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. And this is how You notice similar to how he is concluding in verse 26. For God gives wisdom and knowledge and joy to a man who is good in his sight. But to a fool who is a sinner, he gives the work of gathering, collecting, that he may give to him who is good before God. This is a kind of a paradox. In other words, the preacher, this is the way he says, sit down and pause and reflect. Some of the things that you're busy, amassing, laboring, having sleepless nights, it's just a question of just one dot. You are dead. Tomorrow someone will be enjoying those things. And he put something there that is very important. A sinner. So if you're not a child of God, and all you are thinking of enjoying life, ukapula life, this will be the end. I know of a family. They were very rich. I can't mention names, I'm preaching. The father was rich. In those days, he was staying in Kabwe, Ganaton area. In those days, when the Wazungus were staying around that area, he was the only Zambian. I think maybe there were two or so Zambians. Very rich. Up to there, you visit, you can still see the telephone line going all the way Ganaton Kufamu. The poor telephone, scrap metal, and when that man took me, he says, this is where we stay. There was an orchard here. The house was 1 story. That's in the 60s. Then the sad part of the story, I think maybe it's only him and another person. It's like all the children are fools. They have sold that farm. The properties the father had left, real estates in Kabwe, Kalubushi, sold. And this friend of mine tells me, all that my elder brother does, once they sell, chop, chop, chop. You may be laboring, my brother, my sister, for things which at the end of the day may not profit your children, your next generation. No wonder today we are failing to have an impact on our own generation, our own people. Because these children of ours are watching where we are spending our time, our money, things that make us angry when we fail to achieve those things, which basically it's the gathering and collecting, nothing to do with investing in their lives. We want to invest for them. That's the highest level of foolishness. Invest in the lives of your children. Because that's the thing which will leave test time. What you have left in their lives, not what you have left for them. Solomon is telling us here, I hated life because all these things I've done, things I've left, but they must be left to a man who will come after me and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor. I know we need to leave an inheritance for our children. They say, wise man leaves an inheritance for his children and the children's children. What is that inheritance? I think the best inheritance you can leave is Christ in their lives. Before you start thinking of the material. That house I was referring to, they sold it. 4 of them fighting over rentals. The character called Real Masters bought it. The money they got all finished. And I think if the man who built that house were to wake up today and then take a walk, let me go and see that house. That house was prime when he got that plot. Just crossing into the 70s. One of the first engineers there at whatever Dollar City Council. If we were to wake up and see, we just say, where is my house? mwachinjenga ndefu mweba au mwaliomba achawe twalishitisha kutumpa ukushitisha. Do you know how much I labored for this house? And that's what you and I are doing today. Let's learn from the preacher. And let's not fall into the trap of hating life. Let's find the true meaning of life. Fear God. To obey His commandments. Maybe I need to be a bit more pointed. Are you hating right now? You feel like you hate life? It's not making sense. If it's the material world that is making you to hate life, then you are in the same category. The thing that should create within you a holy discontentment is to see your own children not knowing Christ, living lives that are very riotous. They don't love God. There's no respect. Those are the things that should break your heart. Our God is able to keep them. I know of families that become very humble. Their children are now very successful because the parents invested in their children. And the best investment we can give to our children is for them to know Christ, to love Christ, and to live for Christ. And they can only do that when they see it in us. Solomon said, I hated life when it came to material things. Amen. Father, I want to thank you for your word. We pray that you will be encouraged with this word of exhortation. And at the end of the day, we'll see what matters in life. What is the meaning of life? Lord, help us. That we may find time to pause, reflect, and ask ourselves hard questions. What is it, oh God, we are pursuing here on earth? May you help us to know you, love you, obey you, and be examples to those around us. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.